We were seeing people coming back from war zones, having lost limbs or with gunshot wounds. And there were several things which helped them out. Firstly, their level of conditioning before they went.
Yeah.
So they were strong, they were verging on elite athlete status from a strength and a health point of view. But secondly, when they came back, they had that mentality of health and exercise. Their whole identity was related to being fit, being healthy, being active, and their job role demanded them to be that. As you age, you'll naturally develop wrinkles, you'll naturally develop grey hair. All of those things are part of the natural aging process. The difference between muscle mass and grey hair and wrinkles is muscle mass you can do something about. I want to talk more about strength and what that enables you to do, not only in the short term but longer term as well.
We've got some fresh new young talent doing some things that I know you haven't heard before.
1, 2, 3, listen.
Welcome to Finances, your home for all things financial, investment, money and lifestyle. Hosted and curated by the very talented team of certified financial planners and Burke Britton Financial Partners.
All right, well, welcome to another episode of the Finances podcast. A little bit different this time around. Our normal main host, Jay, is off in the US, so he's on a study tour with Amy, our practice manager. So he's handed the keys over to me, so hopefully I don't do too bad of a job and I'll get a call up again. So today's guest is, we've got Rob Osborne. He's got a long title, physiotherapist, regional leader, partner of Kieser Geelong, Ocean Grove and Torquay. So first of all, thank you for coming in, mate.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Pleasure. Now, one of the things that people maybe think about sometimes with our guests is like, where do they fit in around finances? Now, a concept that Jay's talked about a lot and all of us as a business talk about is the balance of time, money and health. So often a lot of people have one or two of those things, but they don't often have three of them for a long period of time. So I thought today was a really good opportunity, and especially a way that your business is set up, to talk about how they can extend that sort of health and probably more so their mobility and capability to keep doing all the things they plan their life around. So they spend 30, 40 years working to get to a point. Sometimes, sadly, their mobility limits them to a very short period of actually being able to do all the things that we have spoken about. So I think that just adding a bit of purpose to what we'll talk about, I think that overlays well with what your sort of passions are as well, mate. So let's hear a little bit about yourself and how you've come from a little small town in England to being in Aussie now. Would you say you're an Aussie now?
No, I definitely wouldn't say I was an Aussie. I've actually just come off the back of having visitors from the UK, so friends and family over for the last 3 months, and they will tell me that I'm the most Aussie sounding bloke they've ever met, but I'd still consider myself English, and hopefully the accent still comes through in places.
It was a fair old journey when looking at your notes to get to this point. Tell us about your upbringing, and did you always have like a passion for, I think it was a passion for sport, but for physio or people, or how did you fall into that?
I fell into physio relatively late, so I was always active as a kid, and my family were always active. I was a gymnast, but as my main sport, but did any sport going when I was growing up. I'd play rugby, I'd play soccer, I'd just be active the whole time.
Were your parents always like that too?
My parents were. And I think every child sees their parents as the strongest people they've ever met. They can open any jar, they can lift any rock, they can move anything. Like if you've ever got something that needs moving, your parents can always do it. So in my mind as a kid, they were strong. They didn't play sport as such, but my dad worked on overhead power lines, so he was climbing up and down poles every day. My mum was one of those rare people who never learnt to drive, so she'd walk everywhere, she'd cycle everywhere, so she was always active as well. So we were an active family, and that kind of came through into my schooling as well. Loved PE, loved physical education, that was my thing. And when I finished my schooling, I went on to uni to study sport health and exercise science, because that's what I was passionate about.
It's a natural fit for...
And it was kind of around that same time I'd had a few injuries from my sporting background, so from gymnastics. I'd had several knee operations over that time, and I'd seen physios, and and with mixed results. There were good and there were bad, and same as there are in everything.
Oh, so every industry has that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I got to the end of my undergrad degree and didn't really know what I wanted to do. Travelled for a while and ended up in Australia, and I loved it here. I lived down in Adelaide at the time. I was down in Glenelg and spent 6 months down there. Got to know a lot of physios down there and shadowed a bit of their work.
Were you already qualified then, or training?
Nah, this was pre-physio degree, so this was just me trying to work out what future Rob wanted to do.
Yeah.
And at that time, the pathway to immigration into Australia was pretty hard if you didn't have a trade. So that's what sparked me to go back to the UK and really sign up for my Masters of Physio, did a Master's degree over there. And that started the process of the skilled migration route over to Australia.
Was that always where you were trying to get to, or did it sort of just naturally fell that way?
I'd always said when I was here as a poor backpacker that I wanted to come back and actually live here when I had money and I had a proper job. So I guess in the back of my mind it was, but even after physio graduation, it took me 6 years to finally make the move.
Your work
over
history is still a few different steps between finishing and then getting to there. So
Yeah.
how did you find that working, obviously in a few different areas too? So you've got the NHS, private practice, the military, Philippines national rugby team. How are they all different to each other?
Yeah, very, very different environments. And I guess with my work history, I was trying to find what I liked and where I fitted and how my approach to physio after graduation fitted into the real world and what I believed in.
Yep.
I'd always been active and I felt physio was, the whole goal of physio was to keep people doing the things that they wanted to do in their lives for as long as possible.
Yeah, yeah.
I got frustrated in the National Health Service system because I didn't really feel you could see those steps through. You'd see a client for a few sessions and then there's big pressures on wait lists, there's big pressures on throughput. So you never got people to the point where they were better.
So you feel like you were just patching wounds along
Yeah,
the
you
way.
were firefighting.
Yeah,
You weren't dealing with the root cause of the problems a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So got frustrated in the NHS, moved to private practice, and it was a similar story. Like a lot of private practices, you're stuck in a small room, either in someone's house or in the back of a GP clinic, your old weatherboard clinics, and you just don't have the facilities to progress people where they need to be.
Yep.
You can only do so much with a TheraBand or a big inflatable ball, and you just can't get them to that level where they're actually going to get better.
Yep.
From there, it took me into the military, and I was really lucky to land a job at one of the national rehab clinics in the UK. So I was working out of Headley Court, which is an awesome facility, which is now shut down actually.
Yeah.
But that was the place where injured service personnel went, and they'd spend 3 weeks there doing an intensive rehab course, but then they'd be filtered back to their home bases where they'd have access to the ongoing gym equipment and ongoing physio treatment there.
Was that the first time you'd seen where you could actually not just get them fixed up, but actually progress to a better future?
Yeah, 100%. You were seeing people with life-changing injuries. So we were seeing people coming back from war zones, having lost limbs or with gunshot wounds. And there were several things which helped them out. Firstly, their level of conditioning before they went.
Yeah.
So they were strong, they were verging on elite athlete status from a strength and a health point of view. But secondly, when they came back, they had that mentality of health and exercise.
Yeah.
Their whole identity was related to being fit, being healthy, being active, and their job role demanded them to be that. So their whole passion was to do everything they could to get back to that. So you had great compliance with any exercises you gave them. You almost had to convince them to do just the amount you said rather than convincing them to do anything.
Yeah, that level of discipline that comes from those trainings, and we've done a lot of that through the leadership stuff here in the business. And if you can overlay those principles, it's super powerful.
Oh, the things you can achieve are just unbelievable, and it's led to this legacy of Paralympic athletes, which have come from, a lot of them from the military. So people who I treated in Headley Court have gone on to become Paralympic athletes because they've got that level of conditioning already, despite their injuries.
Yeah, and I suppose maybe that probably leads into some of the stuff we'll talk about soon, is if you go in with a level of health and well-being and strength before injury, it's going to be a lot easier to recover post-injury.
100%. There's many factors which are predeterminants of injuries. You can predict who is likely to develop injuries, who's likely to develop certain conditions, who's likely to develop chronic diseases. And you can trace them back to levels of activity and strength and various things in the lead up to when those incidents occur.
Yeah.
So that really showed me what was possible from a physio side of things. And when I did make the move over to Australia, I was really keen to find an environment where I could replicate that over here, and be it military or elsewhere. That's what I was really looking for when I landed here, was somewhere where I could take that health, well-being, fitness and strength and integrate that into my physio practice.
So when you came to Australia, was it straight to Kieser then, but was that just by default, or how did you end up at Kieser? Was there other jobs in Australia first?
No, there weren't any other jobs. There were other interviews, but again, the places I interviewed weren't what I was looking for.
Yep.
I happened across Kieser in South Melbourne.
Yep.
We were living in Port Melbourne at the time, and I'd go past it all the time, and one day I just went in and handed my CV over, and the rest is history pretty much. That was the first job I ever had in Australia, and I'm still here with them nearly 13 years later.
Yeah.
So.
So what did you start out with there? So I think, and probably talk about this a little bit, you're still on the tools as such, like you're still doing that physiotherapy part. I'm guessing at the start was probably 5 days a week or more, assisting patients and getting them on a routine or into a program. Is that fair? Yeah.
So when I first started, I was a physio, a full-time clinical physio. So 5 days a week, 38 hours a week, seeing clients. Over time, as I've moved into different leadership roles and now moved down here, and I'm a partner in the 3 clinics in the region, so Geelong, Ocean Grove and Torquay, my clinical times diminished over that, and now I'm only clinical 1 day a week, but it's still my favourite day of the week. I'm still a physio at heart, and I still love seeing outcomes from my clients.
It's important to remember that part of that process, and a lot of people in their businesses get swept away completely from what they started out doing, and they lose a little bit of connection to the process and the people and why they're actually there. Question around Kieser, when did Kieser come into Australia? How long has it been a presence here? And maybe just a little bit around his background and the system.
Yeah, sure. So firstly, congratulations on the pronunciation of Kieser.
I've had to correct a lot of people. So.
The first stumbling block I get with everyone is pronouncing it Kaiser, but it is called Kieser, and it's named after Werner Kieser, who was the initial brains behind the company. And Werner was from Switzerland, so he opened his first gym in Switzerland in 1966. Right. So a long history of strength training within Kieser. He came into the strength training industry. He was initially an engineer, and a keen amateur boxer. Developed an injury to his back while boxing and was told by various different medical professionals, you'll never box again, and you should rest, and you should be on bed rest. And being a fairly stubborn Swiss man, he decided there must be a better way. And all his life through boxing, he'd dealt with strength. He'd wanted to condition his body, so he thought, surely I can overcome this injury by doing the same thing. And it was the hybrid of his engineering and his strength training philosophies that led him to start developing machinery where he could isolate and specifically train muscles.
Gotcha.
And opened his first gym in 1966 in Zurich, and now they're spread throughout Switzerland, Germany, Austria, and now Australia as well.
Yeah, so it's not global essentially, like there's only still a few
not
focus
global
points.
Yeah. So mainly mainland Europe, none in the UK, but also then over in Australia, and came to Australia fairly late in the piece. So first one opened in 2006, And a slightly different model over here, whereas in Europe it's purely a strength training facility. Over here we have the integration of physio, exercise physiology and strength training.
Let's talk a bit about the specifics of that, and you've mentioned the term strength a lot, and I think one of the main things is Kieser mission is to build a stronger Australia. And I think a lot of people hear strength and they think that they're just bodybuilders and the like, but explain what that strength means for people, and maybe even an example of people, the general sort of person who might come in and their issues, and how you would step them through to build sort of that inner core strength. I know one of your colleagues, Jordan, described it to me as sort of like the chassis of the car, and then building out the strength around that to give you stability. So how would you describe it?
I guess the thing, I'm not going to focus too much on the physio side of things, because when you start to focus on physiotherapy, people dwell on pain.
Yes.
And your catalyst for going to see a physio tends to be pain or injury or something that's preventing you from doing things. And they're very important, and as a physio I'll always treat them, and that will be my starting point for anyone who I see. But I want to talk more about strength and what that enables you to do, not only in the short term but longer term as well.
Yep.
I'll go back to what I said earlier about my parents being the strongest people you ever met, and as a kid I was very aware of that. Over years, and a lot of your listeners and you yourself will be able to relate to this, you start to see that suddenly they're not the superhumans you thought they were. They're now struggling to open jars. They're struggling to get up off the floor if they bend down. They're struggling sometimes to stand up from a chair.
Yeah.
And it's not one event that's led that to happen, but it's the gradual deterioration in their strength as they've aged, which leads to multiple things. It can lead to injuries. It can lead to a propensity to develop chronic health conditions, but the main thing it leads to is a decline in function, and the loss of an ability to do the things you want to do over time. Increasingly, there's more awareness of the need for this. So my prediction is that the majority of your listeners won't have heard of a term of sarcopenia, but give it another 5 years and everyone will have heard of sarcopenia.
What is that? Let's define that.
So sarcopenia is comes from two Latin terms, so sarco meaning flesh or muscle, and penia meaning a poverty or deficiency of. So basically sarcopenia relates to the natural loss of muscle mass over your lifespan. And it's a natural process generally, but when it becomes a problem is when you lose so much muscle mass that you're unable to do the things that you want to do. And that could be play a sport, it could be play with your grandkids, it could be do the garden, but it could be more fundamental things like do the activities of daily living. Yeah,
I think that's where we see it with our clients and extending their ability. You see the ones who haven't done any strength training or haven't looked after themselves, and it goes quickly once they start to deteriorate. They go, I don't really want to fly anymore. Like even just sitting on a plane, like it's sitting, but then to get them up and moving again at the other end it becomes like a big mental hurdle as much as physical hurdle. So then they pull back from these things, and then their activities start to cease. It might be their golf, it could be their walking, like all of those things start to suffer. That's what we see, and you can see the difference between those clearly who have or haven't maintained that strength.
100%. And what we know is that after the age of 30, which is a worryingly low age, but after the age of 30, your strength naturally starts to decline. So you'll see in your 30s and your 40s, you'll see between a 3 and an 8% decline in your muscle mass every decade. When you hit 50, that can extrapolate. So that can go up to between 1 and 4% every year. So I probably don't need to explain to you guys the compounding interest effects, but that's quite startling at that point. So in your 50s, you could be losing half to a kilo of muscle mass a year.
Yeah.
And you could see a deterioration in your strength by 50% or your muscle mass by 50% over less than a 20-year period.
It's pretty scary numbers when you start to get to that point, and often people become time poor through their 30s and stuff. From what I see with clients when they're not managing even their, just their everyday living and their financials, because they've got maybe kids and they're working and they're doing all these other things, so they can start to let those other health activities decline.
Yeah.
And then it's a long way back, but tell me that you can turn that around.
Yeah, and so it's all been pretty bleak so far. The natural process is to lose strength.
Yes.
In the same way that as you age, you'll naturally develop wrinkles, you'll naturally develop grey hair. All of those things are part of the natural aging process. The difference between muscle mass and grey hair and wrinkles is muscle mass you can do something about.
Yep.
At any age, so widespread studies have shown that if you start strength training in your 30s, if you start strength training in your 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, even your 80s or 90s, you can slow down the rate of decline. Mm-hmm. You can even reverse the rate of decline and get stronger. Yeah. The strength curves for improvement in muscle strength for an untrained population are exactly the same no matter where you start. Yep. So you gain strength really quickly in those first 6 months, and then it does plateau out as you become stronger, but you're able to maintain a level of strength that you didn't have before.
Yes. Yeah.
So you can very much do something about it. You can slow your rate of decline, and a lot of the time you can actually increase your strength and increase your function.
So you'd have people of all ages who both currently are members and going to the gym, but
Yep.
also people joining at all ages as well, I would assume.
Oh yeah, definitely. So we have clients across the Kieser clinics who are in their teens,
yeah.
who are recovering from an acute injury. It could be a ACL, it could be a footy injury, it could be rolled ankles. So we have people all the way from their teens. My oldest client is late into her 90s,
yeah.
and she still comes to the gym twice a week and does her strength training program. And in her words, she does it because she doesn't want to get old.
Yeah.
She wants to be able to still walk into town. She wants to be able to go for coffee with her friends. She doesn't want to deteriorate. That
sort of aging gracefully is a big thing. I think we see clients, and I was talking to one yesterday, and he's 85, but I call him sometimes and he's out on a walk, but he said, sorry, I was just doing some squats at the park bench, and then but he's 85 and you would not pick it, and he's out there just doing it but he's always been that way. Like he's always been played sport and been health and fitness focused, so it's probably been easier for him to maintain that. And some people haven't necessarily grown up around sport as well, not to just be sort of bundling them all into that same boat, but do you find that there's some people who haven't done any sort of physical exercise up to a point, and then it still isn't a barrier though? It's still not a reason to hold them back. If anything, it probably gives them more reason to get on board.
It's really not a barrier, although it's often perceived as a barrier for people. So people who haven't had a sporting background, a strength training facility, a gym as such, is a very intimidating place.
Yes.
And I think I said to you when I first came and consulted with you guys about my finances, I said, I've always known I needed to sort out my finances, but I didn't know where to start.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I should be investing in or where I should be putting my money or how to make my money work. And it's exactly the same for so many people I see, so many clients I see who come and see me, and they go, geez, I know I need to do something. I know I need to do strength, but I'm just bombarded with all these different options.
I think that's a bit the overlays between our two industries. I always find it it's almost scary, the parallels. And people often are thinking about the outcomes or the solutions, but they've not thought about what their current situation is. We often talk about doing a financial stock take initially, and then working out what your goals and objectives are, and then starting to look at the outcomes. It's probably a similar process as doing an assessment and saying where are you at the moment.
Yep.
Looking at the deficiencies and then trying to work a program of that. And then it's just being consistent. Doing the same things for a long time is often what we talk about with investing. It's pretty much investing in your own physical wealth and your strength.
Yeah, definitely. It's habit forming, and there's various different things, especially when we talk about strength. We know that less than a quarter of the Australian population do any form of strength training, despite World Health Organization guidelines saying every Australian should be doing 2 strength training sessions a week. So we know the uptake in it is really low. And the reasons for that are people just not feeling comfortable getting into it. And strength requires certain elements as well. That's the other thing. So in order for something to effectively strengthen your muscles, you need to have, one, a sufficient intensity. Secondly, it needs to be progressive. So you can't just do the same thing with the same weight over and over again and expect to get stronger. You've got to progress your weight as your body adapts. Thirdly, you've got to do it for a long enough, so you've got to do it with enough frequency. So you need to be doing it at least twice a week. And the last one is you've got to do it for a sufficient duration to have an effect. In the same way as investing, you need to keep doing it ongoing in order for it to have an effect on your future.
I think that's one of the key things, and all those parallels is it's funny, like we talk about the same things. You need time frame, you need frequency, you need to commit to it and have process and structure, as boring as that sounds. I think one of the other parts, and I'm not sure exactly how you guys position this with people, but it's certainly a different gym environment going into Kieser than it is going into other gyms, I think. And again, I'm not sure if it's a set thing with sort of no mirrors, there's certain like dress code, like there's some things that make it a bit more of a comfortable space. Are they specifics for Kieser, or is that, how does that look?
When a lot of people imagine a gym, and I use the inverted commas for the word gym because I don't consider us a gym. We're a strength training clinic. We're much more scientific based and medical based than we are fitness based. And that reflects in our environment as well. So there's no loud pumping music. We don't have mirrors where people are looking at themselves and examining their form in mirrors. We don't have lots of people wearing Lycra. What we have is people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s and 90s.
And 30s, I go there
and
too.
30s, who want to stay fit and healthy. They want to do it in a comfortable environment, and they want to do it in the most efficient way possible. Because you mentioned yourself, people are time poor. You can have an effective dose of strength training in 2 30-minute sessions a week. That's all you need.
I think, and even some of the efficiencies, again from my experience, so you've got this app it's super easy to go in there, guide you through it. I know that when I look back, it's, I think, 36 minutes to 38 minutes, depending on how busy it is in there. But I know that I only need 45 minutes to get there, to be done and out again twice a week. So if you're just simplifying that, because it's all that confusion. It's like the same with investing, and they're not sure when and how long and how much to do and all these things. If you go, right, here's a simple process. There's some safety parameters around the equipment, and there's people there to guide you with that journey as well. You don't need any level of knowledge around the fitness either. Like strength, you just go in and you'll be educated too.
All of our team who we have working in the clinics, they're all degree qualified exercise scientists. Their whole degree is about how to train certain populations safely, effectively. And with that, you've got the support of the exercise physiologist, you've got the support of the physiotherapist as well. So if you do have an injury, that's not a barrier to getting in and doing it either. If you've got pain, you've probably got pain because you're not doing strength training, rather than having pain which is preventing you strength training.
One of the parallels, we've spoken about this previously, around you sort of have to build some momentum into it as well. So I see with people who haven't done any saving, any investing, maybe they've got bad credit cards and bad debts, like if we can get them starting to get a little bit of reward for their effort and see some progress, then they become really good at it. Like they become really good savers or investors, and they become disciplined. Is that much the same for those people in the early days? And the good thing probably is that your strength does increase quickly at the start, so they get a good bit of reward for effort. They see the numbers going up, and then that gets them sort of on board. Would that be fair?
Definitely. The small wins on the board, and especially if someone's coming to us with pain as well. If you can have an effect on someone's pain, then then that's a great way to show them actually this works and this is allowing me to do something, or a change in function as well.
Yeah.
If you can link it to a goal, which you talked about earlier, like being able to bend down and pick up the grandkids, or being able to climb a flight of stairs easier.
Yeah.
If you can see those functional improvements, it's really motivating to say, actually, this is working and I can see a change and I can see myself doing this longer term. Because the consequence of not doing it is a return of pain, or it's a deterioration in function again, and I go backwards to where I was.
I think seeing that little and getting that reward along the way is important, in setting those. We set short-term goals for people. There's the medium term and there's the long term. And as much as people will talk about their long-term goals, like a lot of people will lose patience. Like it's if you need to do something for 20 years, like if you get someone in their 50s and you're talking about them being active through their 70s, like maybe there's a small part of them that has an eye on that. But if you can improve their functionality and capability through their 50s and into their 60s, then they're way more chance of still being on board in their 70s.
Yeah.
Otherwise, people are okay at deferred reward, but they're not great. And I think in society now it's become even worse. Like people want
immediate
gratification, and in some ways the financial system flips it, where you have things like Afterpay, where you get gratification first and then you pay it off later. So there's no sort of shortcuts on strength, is there?
No, there's not. And randomly, it's not his usual content, but I was listening to a thing that Jimmy Carr, the controversial comedian, said the other day, and he said one of his most profound life lessons is prioritise later, so prioritise tomorrow. So don't look at everything you're doing for today, but prioritise those future years.
Yeah.
And you talked about then, you gave this figure of 70, and currently the population sees 70 as an old age. I was reading an article last night saying that 1 in 6 Americans born now are likely to see their 100th birthday. Centurion age group are the fastest growing decade of the population. And in the UK, they're saying that over 50% of babies born this year will live to over 90. So 70 isn't old anymore.
No.
90's old. And the issue with that is we're seeing people living longer, but they're not living healthier.
I was going to say, I suppose there's a few overlays, is that if people aren't doing anything more to improve their health through that life, but there's also so many more vices that make it worse, like even technology and TV, or like things like that, and then dietary things, and like that whole cycle. So you look at it now, and someone described it to me once, like, you used to retire at 60, but you were going to be dead in 10 years.
Yeah.
Like now, if you retire at 60, you're probably only about 2/3 of the way through.
Yeah.
Ballpark. So that's a long way to be not having functionality and mobility to be doing everything you want to do. So you've got to be committed to it.
So for you guys, the challenge is you've got all those years where you're not working, you've got to maintain your financial health for those years, so that you're able to spend and do the things you want to do financially. Whereas the point of view I look at is that you need to prepare physically for those later years, because there's no point in having all the money in the world in the bank but not being able to spend it on the things you want to do, because you physically can't do them.
Yeah.
If you can't travel, you can't play golf, you can't walk, then suddenly the money becomes irrelevant, because you haven't got the health to go with it.
And the money can help you, maybe you fast track a knee replacement or something like that, but it's not necessarily like it's going to be a short-term fix for a bit of pain or something. It's still not going to get you back doing all the things you want to do. Like those things will happen. Joints will wear out, and people will have hereditary issues that maybe lead them to having those problems. But that's if you've got a better fitness going into it. Then I see those clients too, the ones who've had the knee or the hip, and some of them you within 6 months you wouldn't even know they're back doing everything they did before. But the ones who came into it with low strength, from my perception, the ones who struggle on the other side, is that maybe just on that is the people obviously better placed on the way into operations obviously will naturally bounce back quicker.
Yeah, definitely. The better in, better out terminology with all operations, not just joint replacements, not just musculoskeletal, but any operations is well known. There's big studies which show that a simple measure of strength. So grip strength, the amount of force you can generate from gripping, is one of the best predictors of overall health, but also of mortality. So a 5 kilogram reduction in your grip strength can lead to a 16-fold increase in your rates of mortality over the same period. And it's not to say that having stronger grip isn't going to prevent you getting run over by a bus or getting cancer or having one of these big life events, but being stronger gives you the resilience to recover from those big life events. You might break a leg, but if you're stronger, you're going to recover better. You might have to have a hip replacement, but if you're stronger, your recovery is going to be so much better. You might have to have chemotherapy or radiotherapy, which are poisonous to muscles. They deteriorate muscles so quickly, but if you've got a better store of muscle mass to start with, then you're going to have more in reserve when you come out the other end of that, and you've got more chance of surviving those big life events. So
it's funny, like the overlays, your overlays with that is we talk about those financial events. Like if you've built wealth, that you can see off those emergencies much more comfortably. Like it's if you have an illness or an operation or some financial, maybe it's a family member who needs assistance around them. Like you can actually see that off and come out the other side and be okay. But if you haven't done the prep and you haven't put in the build-up, then that could be terminal to your ability to fund travel. So I think the parallels are everywhere through that process. Is you have to have like a robust financial position, same as your robust health and strength position to see off those issues. Some people that topples them over, they have one little domino fall in their financials and the whole thing unravels, and probably the same with their health. Is one thing trips them over and that's it. And we see that with clients. They might have a fall or something, but they've just got no strength. And that's it. Like they never recover from what might appear like something relatively minor, and is probably relatively minor to another person as well.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's what you've got left in reserve. It's how far above that level of disability your strength currently is. If you've got a big buffer, you have a fall, you might break a hip, but you've got enough to recover from that. If you don't, your strength still deteriorates, and those figures I gave earlier, those percentage decreases, they go through the ceiling when you have a life event, when you have an injury, or when you have a chronic disease or anything like that. That strength loss is so much quicker. As soon as you drop below that level of disability, it's really hard to get back up from there.
Any other key sort of themes or anything you're seeing with the current sort of climate of people around what they should be thinking about?
There are some real positives. I do feel that health literacy is improving, and people are starting to realise they have to invest now to make sure they're there in the future. The thing, I guess, where the gap is knowing how to do that. And same as we talked earlier, it's they realise that they've got to do something about their health. It's a boring story. It's you eat better, you sleep better, you exercise more, you get stronger, you're going to be better in later life. But there's so much information, it's hard to distill that down to what are the practical steps I actually need to take today or tomorrow, or how do I ingrain this into my behaviour moving forward. So the knowledge of the fact we need to do it is there, but the knowledge of how to do it currently isn't. And that's where people like me or health professionals are there to guide you along that journey.
I think funneling people in, and there's so much content out there, which is a good thing, but it also can be a bit dangerous because it actually overwhelms people with where to start on that journey. And we find that, and people, we're sort of happy anyone comes in and contacts us, even if maybe the source of it wasn't necessarily what they needed, because it's just that it started a conversation and it started us being able to help them, to guide them in the right direction of what that may be. So just starting that process is crucial. What's the process? Someone wants to reach out to yourself or to the team at any of the 3 clinics around the area, or broadly, what's the process for them?
So anyone who comes in to see us, has an initial appointment with a physio or exercise physiologist. We'll look at their goals, we'll look at their current function, so we might do some strength tests with you or some cardiac tests or whatever the problems are that you're having, and then we'll put together a bit of a bespoke treatment plan for you, but majority of that will involve some kind of strength training, so we'll get you in and we'll set you up with a program. You can book online. I think we'll put
we'll share the links out and everything, so don't stress on those links. We'll make sure they're all shared out there for you to click through. Again, even if you have questions, then fire them through to us in any way, shape or form. I'm sure you'd be happy to help out with that. But essentially it's that starts off with, in some way similar to our process, where are you at?
Yeah, exactly. It's essentially a health check of where your current status is and what things you need to do to get yourself future-proofed for the things you want to continue doing in the future. Yeah. And it could be that you've already stopped doing those things. It could be that you loved golf, but you can't play golf because your back gets sore or you can't walk 18 holes. It doesn't mean you can't get back to that. Or it could be that you're just finding it harder and you're worried that in 5 years you're not going to be able to play anymore. And we can extend that 5 years to 10, 15. A quote from Werner is, we can't stop you getting older, but we can stop you getting weaker. And that's the key to it all. We want to keep you doing the things that you love doing for longer.
It's different, like even for myself, like golf was one of those ones where I think maybe when I set those goals at the start was like just being able to play around a golf without knowing that the next day was going to be like horrific. Like, like it was simple as that for where I was at initially. Like now I could go and play golf, it wouldn't worry me at all. Like, but you know, so you get a bit of a reward for effort, and you still have maybe some ups and downs, but you can see that you're progressing, and you can go, I can actually do things. Like, and again, I could have probably let that go a lot longer. I probably let it go too long. Like in hindsight, you go, if I just got onto this earlier and done this, you can do all the stretching, and you can do all that sort of pain relief. But without getting stronger, like I just would be doing the same thing over and over and over again.
Exactly. It's back to your firefighting rather than dealing with the cause of it. And can't guarantee that your handicap will come down, but it is more pleasurable to actually play.
Yes. I think the key thing, and this is again, so we're going back a little bit to one of your points earlier around the military side of things, and one of the principles we apply for people, and like is that discipline equals freedom part, and it's literally like, it's very military term, but it's the same thing. It's like your financials, it's your health, it's your strength, it's all those things. If you're not disciplined, it's not going to happen. Like you really don't. It's one of those key things you literally will not get out if you don't put in. Like maybe there's some people who are naturally a bit stronger at the start than others, but overall you're all going to end up declining, aren't you? There's no one who just stays strong just because they were born strong.
There's not. There's not. It's part of the natural aging process. You lose muscle mass if you're not doing specific strength training. You can slow the rate, you can maintain, but if you're not doing strength training, you will get weaker over time, and eventually that weakness will catch up with you, and you won't be able to do the things that you want to do.
Definitely. Back to probably again, just one of the key things I said at the start around that sort of, again, our philosophy around that time, money, health thing. We've got clients, and I've probably been pumping it to them as well and trying to talk about these things. And I think, again, as a business, like Jay and Peter have both been very big on health and wellbeing and strength too. So the overlays are very strong here. For some of our clients, if they were keen to come in, I think you might have mentioned that maybe you could do something for them to get them in the door. So what was your offering to them?
Yeah, definitely. The other barrier to people coming in is they're not wanting to invest in their health, they're wanting to invest in other things. So like for these initial consults, we're happy to do a 50% off your initial consult. So just mentioning the Britton Burke and mentioning the podcast will get you 50% off if you book that initial appointment. And then we'll work out a plan which suits you and suits your time commitments and suits your finances and everything else.
And then they come back to us and we tell them it's a non-negotiable. It's like, it's almost like for us that spend on their health and things is just like, that's a non-discretionary for us. Like it needs to be spent on keeping yourself going. Otherwise, what's the good of the funds really? So
exactly.
So anyone out there, again, reach out, get that happening. thanks for coming in, mate. It was really good. Again, I know we've talked about this a bit, and I always enjoy the parallels between it. So I think Jay will be keen to probably come back and probe you some more questions down the track. So we might even see what feedback we get from people, and then go again. So thank you, everyone. We'll put the contact details, the links, everything in the show notes. Look forward to another round 2, mate.
Yeah,
thank you.
It's been great. I really enjoyed it, and I feel we touched the surface on benefits of strength. There's so many secondary benefits that also line up apart from getting stronger. There's the benefits on your global health. So I'd love to come back if there's an opportunity to talk about more at a later date.
Definitely. Thanks, mate.
Perfect.
Thanks, Job.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you're keen to understand more about how financial advice could benefit you, follow us on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter at Burke Britain FP, or Google Burke Britain Financial Partners. Check out our client reviews, testimonials, and make a time to meet one of our certified financial planners by clicking Book Now on our website. Thanks for listening.
Any information contained in this podcast is of a general nature only. No account was taken as to the objectives, financial situation, or needs of any particular person. Therefore, before making any decision, listeners should consider the appropriateness of any information with regard to their particular objective, financial situation, needs, and seek independent advice from a licensed professional specific to their circumstances.
All right, hit it.
That translates to don't be a moron and act on what some random person says on a podcast. Take personal responsibility, do your homework, ask questions, and speak to an actual human that knows what they're talking about before you do anything. PP Financial Solutions Proprietary Limited, trading as Burke Britain Financial Partners, are authorised representatives of AMP Financial Planning Limited, AFS licence number 232706.